How to conquer disease. Hello, once again, and welcome to the program. I am Soren. In reality, what is the principal pathway towards happiness? My only answer to that is healthiness. A Turkish proverb tells that a happy mind lives in a well body. Therefore, a sick body can only hold an unhappy mind. If you have not studied medicine and you are not set about to cure the illness of the physical body of somebody, or your own, that makes for the mental ill as well, and the mental illness that leads the body to that ill. How can one assure oneself for a good health then? Some may think that these questions cannot be answered, but they are easy to answer. You can indeed assure a good health for yourself. You don't have to have studied medicine. You can and will find the type of happiness which a perfect health brings. It is in your hands. Man has battled disease through the ages gone by. After many trials and tribulations, through to the modern medicine of our times. And there has been a great battle to overcome the killers of mankind, the diseases that struck them from within. As you know, medical men have searched, delved into, and carved up cadavers, experimented with injections, and searching for drugs and medical cures, and came a long way in combating the diseases. Medicine has also discovered a concept that while it is considerably new, but is as old as time. We are now facing the idea of the will to live. Through the years, physicians and scientists have taken note of that some people have wanted to recover from illnesses, and others did not want to live. The former group almost always survived and lived on. Among these people who were affected, what might be termed as miracle cures were also experienced. I would like to talk to you about these as well. Amongst those who did not desire to live, even competitively minor illnesses have proved fatal for them. Question: why was that so? Think about it. Medical science for a long time felt at a loss to explain why what should have been almost certainly fatal illnesses were overcome and patients recovered, when none but they themselves felt they would become well again. Nor could any scientist or a doctor explain why seemingly minor ailments proved fatal to others, when everyone but the patient was positive that a cure was possible. Then it was the psychiatry that finally began to investigate the so-called will to live. Question: could a patient's mental attitude have anything to do with his recovery? Could a patient assist himself towards recovery? Or could he be prevented himself from becoming well again? Now, the results are well known to us all, and we have learned all about psychosomatic illnesses. And I'm sure you have learned how your mind has been able to control your body. I can assure you that I myself have experienced the effects of positive thinking. I'll tell you a story. Once I was hospitalized with a large, reasonably complicated and very vital operation at a hospital. And shortly after the operation, I have been told that I needed to stay in the ward for at least a week to be looked after. But I was determined to be well again very, very quickly. The following morning, I was so well that the doctors taking care of me have suggested that I can now go home. My partner at the time was spellbound. I knew that I was going to be well and became well. And I am as well as one could be ever since. The first propositions of the working hypotheses have served to show that it is possible to control your illness and secure it if you have the will to do so. Ponder about that thought for a moment. Throughout this program, you may discover that I am quoting often about issues of faith and trust. Please take note that they are by no means to promote any religious ideal, but simply neutrally considering specifically elected issues of interest. You will also discover the several times mentioned faith healing sessions within the realms of the understanding of, say, Holy Scriptures. However, it should be understood that the issues of faith healing are not solely based on my own particular belief system. In fact, no belief system is being promoted, as such miracles or miraculous healings have taken place throughout the centuries, with almost all religious systems of belief, whether Judaic, Christian, or Islamic. They are the types of faith healing which has been found not to be dependent on what religious belief system is being featured, as they all seem to follow the same principles of believing, trust, conviction, and faith based on unconditional love. I can mention a few experiences of my own that I have had, amongst which faith healing also was researched into when in several other parts of the world, including Philippines, studying the faith healers, covering most scriptural, perhaps Christian way of achieving the healing of the faithful who trusted that they would be healed at a hidden away chapel there, where a Christian sister conducted the congregational blessing sessions, wherein even I have been asked to join the completely exhausted sister behind the main hall, as well as other people and some women in pain after a double hysterectomy. I have never forgotten my friend in Perth and her husband coming surprisingly to my place one night after a car accident when their vehicle toppled several times on their return from a holiday, and that they were in a heavy shock. She preferred to come to me for healing, while I never considered myself, or professed at the time to be, a spiritual healer. And indeed, my experience was extraordinary after a session before involving the medical staff. I have seen the need for it to conduct a session which I had never experienced before. Her lying on a spare bed and me extending my arms for the very first time ever over her body without touching her, and observing her healing, getting up without any discomfort or open wounds any longer. Later in Philippines, at the said chapel, as we made mention of before, helping individuals to be well again, as, for instance, a young man paralyzed from neck down to his feet after an industrial and electrical accident. And after a while, talking to him for the first time, a young man raised his voice and asking for a glass of water for the first time ever since his accident. It was an unforgettable experience. Many people who had problems arrived at the chapel, for they were poor and could not afford any hospital expenses. So they said. This now brings me to the fifth proposition, as also, according to M. Germain, was, as you can recall, that the superconscious has absolute control of the functions and conditions of the body. There is no condition over which your superconscious has not the ability of control if you wanted it that way. In this proposition, the superconscious is constantly amenable to control by the power of suggestion, meaning that the desire to get well strongly enough is all that the superconscious requires to help the organic system rid itself of that which is ailing the body. Sounds very positive, does it not? Now, you need to think of disease as something that creates discomfort for you. Think of it not as the word you know of, that is disease, meaning illness. Think of it instead as the opposite of comfort, the opposite of ease, that is dis-ease. What could be your immediate physical reaction to something that makes you uncomfortable? Question mark. As the logic dictates, you may or may not, and will, that thing from your life or move yourself away from it. That is the way it should be with dis-ease, removal of it. You need to move towards ease with the power of superconscious. The entire key to the idea of utilizing the superconscious to bring to you that heaven's given power and wisdom to have a good health, abundant happiness, and great success. That may not be such an important one in combating dis-ease. It hinges on the very plan of substituting every negative thought with a positive one. Suppose you try this experiment within a little notebook you have. Every time you find something disturbing, or annoying, or frustrating, or aggravating you, write down what it is. Then, after a moment's clear thought, substitute a positive idea for the negative one. Imagine now being a motorist on a highway who is frustrated by the other motorists who tend to make too much use of their horns instead of their brains in driving, as it has said before in your notebook. Your entry will probably at first appear this way: excessive horn blowing drives me crazy. After you think about how it is to be combated, your entry will now take on the added word, perhaps, while having the negative thought crossed out, that nothing drives me crazy. Just imagine. Imagine also now that you are a little frustrated at your healthy, happily noisy children. Your intolerance of their happy, overly loud voices may make you enter in your notebook: I can't stand anything but noisy children. On further consideration, the positive thought would make this substitution: I cannot stand anything at all. As M. Germain says, simple? My answer, yes, and quite effective in preparing your superconscious for the type of mental process that is going to make you a lot healthier person. The idea behind this example is to explain that within you, in your superconscious, there is a power and wisdom, of which we mentioned before. Now, this power and wisdom, this understanding of the purpose of the superconscious, will help you cast the evil from you that brings with it illness, and therefore unhappiness. And that is, yes, you know it, dis-ease. Now, the faith factor in healing has been proved by medical men over many years. There is much more important evidence in favor of such a belief. Research has given us definite proof that faith, properly understood and applied, is a powerful tool. It's a powerful factor in overcoming disease and creating good health. It seems that obviously this is what Jesus Christ meant when he said that the kingdom of God is within you. He also said the truth would make you free. What is the truth? And from what shall it free us? That's a good question. The truth is that God is love. The healing power of God's love alone can free us from the ills and woes of the world. The dual nature of man is characterized by the negativeness of his savage ancestry, and the spiritual attributes personified by Christ's love for all mankind. You have seen how the human organism responds to mental suggestion and emotional stimuli. The relation of emotional reactions to the power of suggestion usually determines the condition of the organism, commonly called health or sickness, or which I prefer the term ease and dis-ease. Same as Dr. Germain. If human organism is functioning properly, it will resist the germs of disease as well as negativeness of dis-ease. But if your resistance is lowered by negative emotional reactions, you are highly susceptible to ill health, organic and mental, both. It is generally quite well recognized now that most illness, disease, or dis-ease comes from within you, as we have discussed earlier. These ills are termed psychosomatic. They are caused by emotional disturbances which disrupt the harmonious functioning of the human body. The one man who has had perhaps the greatest influence in modern times on women's concept of childbirth was Dr. Grantley Dick Reed, who makes an astounding assertion in his well-known book, Childbirth Without Fear. For my own part, he says in his writings, after 30 years of close association with physical and mental derangements of health, I am persuaded without a shadow of doubt that with the exception of unforeseen accidents, the origin of every form of disease, both surgical and medical, whether hereditary or not, can be traced by careful investigation to the influence of fear upon the human mechanism. Earlier we discovered how the body reacts under the emotional stimulus of fear or anger, of which worry and resentment are the most common modern counterparts. We also discovered how negative responses can be caused by traumas or which we may have no conscious awareness. The feeling mind, which controls and directs bodily functions, has no reasoning power. Its reactions are largely instinctive, and it responds to negative feeling attitudes, just as it would to any physical danger or threat to the security of the organism. The response is either a flight or a fight reaction, just as the cause of most disease is within. So is the cure. Once you note the plain fact, the remedy is simple. You have learned how the organism changes its vibrational rhythm from harmony to discord in response to emotional disturbances. You must therefore learn to control your emotions. This control is the best way to keep the body functioning harmoniously. Now, this control is also the best way to guard against the encroachment of dis-ease and disease. Cure is important once a healthy state has been lost. Prevention of that loss is of greater importance by far. Sometimes it is necessary to cure both functional and organic illness. When this becomes a necessity simultaneously, the most effective way is to attempt harmonizing the human body. You must bring into play nature's own way of healing. The diseased and the diseased body, that is by spiritual therapy. But what is spiritual therapy, you might ask? Its mechanics are quite simple. The most commonly used means of achieving this double healing is by prayer or meditation. An example of this so-called miraculous power of prayer is given by a Dr. Rebecca Beard in her book, Every Man's Search. I too read a portion of it, and I'm going to present it to you now. Then we came to the great hurdle, the headless horseman, that frightening thing, which still holds the majority of the people of the world in the grip of fear, cancer. Our thought was perhaps we can do everything through prayer, but this, and yet intuitive knowledge, and knowing, we realized we dared not step out into the world of spiritual healing until we were absolutely sure that there was no barrier and no hurdle that could not be overcome through God's healing power. Because we had seen so many cancer sufferers, we found this a tremendous hurdle to pass. We needed conviction, and we prayed, Father, show us a condition that is unquestioned, about which no one can rationalize. We want to see something that is so evident, and its outward manifestation, that everyone can see it. We want to see something that is called incurable. We want to see an instantaneous healing, and we want to see it complete and made possible without any agency but prayer. The answer to our prayers was the healing of our friend, Alice Newton, or Leavenworth, Kansas. It was not many weeks after we had prayed that she came to us in St. Louis. She had known me in Kansas City when I practiced there. This is what she said. I come because I have faith in you, and because I know you have something beyond medicine. I am in great need. Tell me the truth. Her appearance when we first saw her shocked me. Her huge abdomen was larger than a woman at full-term pregnancy. She had the dreaded cachexia. Her emaciated body was scarcely able to carry the great burden. Her question was, do you think that I can be healed with prayer and nothing else? For just a moment, I felt a sinking feeling. This is it, I thought. You have asked for it. You wanted it. You see, I didn't believe with my conscious mind. But my subconscious said, help thou mine unbelief. Then I heard myself saying, yes, Alice, I believe, but I want to see it. I need to see it. All right, she replied. I will do it for you and for my husband. I will go home and map out a program and a schedule. I will follow it every day, and I have absolute faith now that our prayer will be answered, and the Lord will heal me. She went home, cancelled all social obligations, did simple things about the house, rested, walked in the open air, read her Bible, sang hymns, and prayed. Every day she repeated the same pattern. She wrote to us often, and none of her letters did she ever suggest failure. She confidently awaited the moment of her healing. You have no idea how this strengthened our faith. The unswerving faith of one person is a tremendous factor in building the certainty of God's power in their lives. Now knowest thou arguments thine own life to thy neighbor's creed has lent. Among Alice's friends was a wonderful doctor who visited her often, not as a doctor, but as a friend. His medical knowledge made him insist that she permit him to tap her. It was curious, but the relationship of doctor and patient seemed to be reversed between them. It was she who would say to him, "Don't you worry about me, doctor." She often consulted and encouraged him, but he would go on his way, sorry and unbelieving. Spiritual conviction and certainty such as hers is not easily gained. It is necessary to pay the price. Her constancy of purpose lasted over a period of 2 years. Finally, one night, with no special preparation, the miracle happened. At the time, her husband, a guard at the Leavenworth prison, was working from midnight until morning. Alice retired shortly after he left for work and went to sleep as usual. As she slept, she had a vision of the disciples asleep, as Jesus came down the mountainside from his lone vigil of prayer. His face was full of sorrow as he looked at the sleeping man, then glanced over and smiled at her. Immediately the scene changed. It was the day of the crucifixion. The cross was being lowered into the hole that had been dug for it. The Master's body already nailed upon it. Torn with the thought of how the jar would hurt him, she cried out, "Oh, my Jesus," putting up her hand to steady his body and ease the suffering. At that moment, her hand dropped to her abdomen, and she awoke. Only then she realized that her abdomen was perfectly flat. The huge accumulation was gone. Immediately she felt all around her for moisture, thinking surely something had passed. But the bed was dry. There was no pain. Her spirit rejoiced, and she knew something wonderful had happened. So she turned out the light and waited. Her husband came home rather early that morning. He felt somehow that something had happened. His excitement was so great when he heard the news that to relieve him, she asked him to go for her friend, the doctor, cautioning him not to tell. Alice was a woman with a marvelous sense of humor. So, before the doctor came, she slipped a pillow under the bed covers. She wanted to hear him scold. As he came in and stood at the foot of her bed, he shook a warning finger, saying, "Alice, I told you to let me tap you." She only smiled at first. Then she said, "Yes, doctor, and I told you that God was going to take care of me. See what he has done." And she pulled the pillow out and dropped it to the floor. The doctor was speechless for a moment. Then he rushed around the bed and knelt at her side. His questions came short and fast in his excitement. What passed? What came away? Was there water? Was there blood? Did you perspire heavily? Finally, his questions ceased, for her answers continued to be, "No, nothing passed, nothing came away." At last he said quietly, "No one but God could perform a miracle like that." She stayed in bed for a week because they thought it was wise. People passed through the house constantly to see her in the days that followed. At the end of the week, she was weighed, and it was found that she had lost 38.5 pounds that had disappeared overnight. And that was the answer to our prayer. That was a condition which no one could say had not existed. It could not be rationalized away. It was an instantaneous healing. No one could explain it. Where did 38.5 pounds of actual weight go in 3 hours? That was the miracle. I had wanted to see something which I could not explain. God has answered my prayer. Later, Alice came to St. Louis and asked if I wished to examine her. This I did, and found every organ fresh and virginal, as though she had never been ill. She lives today. This happening has had a strange sequel. During the past 12 years, did Leavenworth paper and the Kansas City Star have mentioned this remarkable recovery each January on the anniversary of Alice's healing. Dr. Beard, who practiced medicine for 20 years before entering the healing ministry of spiritual therapy, has said that a better understanding of our emotional selves and a return to religious faith seem to form the combination that holds the greatest promise of permanent help to any of us. Is there any other explanation of such a miracle as the healing of Alice Newton? Medicine has discovered that in the normal course of events, it takes the body almost a year to organically renew itself. Yet, we have discovered earlier how so-called miracles of faith healing appear to result from an accelerated process of organic repair. The extremely high vibrational rate of the thalamus, which quickens the process of organic repair, usually is marked by some vivid mental picture, commonly known as a vision. Vision system from the practice of visualization, usually the practice habit of praying with such deep feeling or subjective faith that mental pictures are formed in the mind's eye, the occult sight of the superconscious mind. Visualization is a sign of increased acceleration of the vibrational frequency of the thalamus. Now, spiritual therapy is not alone confined to the ministry of healing, so to say. Its greatest service to man is in furthering God's plan of, shall we say, evolution. Civilization is again at the crossroads of destiny. The only hope for the survival of man is the attainment of the goal for which he was created, the attainment of psychological and spiritual, as well as physical evolution. Such a development was predicted by the late French scientist Pierre Ney in his Human Destiny. He writes, "The moral perfection latent in a small minority will blossom in the majority, as will the universal comprehension and love radiated by Christ. They whose souls have been perfected in the course of their passage through their bodies, who have fully understood the conflict between the flesh and the spirit, of which they have seen the stage, have triumphed over matter, and they alone represent the evolutive group who are the forerunners of the superior race, which is to come. Too long have the mysteries of life been hidden behind the veil of mysticism. The human organism derives no power or benefits from the soul. The soul can do nothing for mind and body. Its purpose is to carry over after the death of the physical organism. Mind determines the condition of the body. The soul is conditioned by the quality of mind in its passage through the body, as a great French scientist said. Miraculous cures seldom occur, wrote Dr. Alexis Carrel in Man, the Unknown. The reason is obvious. It takes a heap of loving. Remember, Alice Newton prayed daily for 2 years to increase the vibratory rate of the thalamus enough to induce the phenomenal cataclysm that does the healing. In other words, as we read before, you must give before you can receive. This is the only basis on which the law of love works. Remember Christ's answer to the question? Which is the greatest commandment in the law? Mankind has obviously retrogressed, morally, mentally, and physically. The evidence of this is the widening spread of degeneracy, moral, mental and physical. Crime has increased. Immorality has increased. Disease has increased. All this is evidence of the fact that we have failed to comply with the law of love. We have ceased to progress psychologically and spiritually. If we continue to move in this direction, we are heading further and further away from the good that is God. God works his wonders, be they good or bad, through laws by governing all his handiwork. Laws governing human nature are just as immutable as the laws that control cosmic forces. You would do well to heed the admonition of the Scriptures. God is not mocked, for whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. In spiritual therapy, you find the universal comprehension and love radiated by Christ. Universal comprehension can be acquired by cultivating the hidden power and wisdom of the collective unconscious without being religious. The key to this deeper intelligence is the love radiated by Christ. You must learn to use the power which God has endowed you with through the progressive process of, evolution, just as Jesus himself used it. Did he not say, "He that believeth in me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do"? Spiritual therapy affords one of the best means of preventing the ills of mind, body, and soul, of making sure that we have ease rather than dis-ease. You must emulate the love radiated by Christ through the medium of prayer, meditation, and visualization. Dr. Beard, talking of the discovery of the psychosomatic causes of high blood pressure and diabetes, said, "The medical world can give relief in this order like these, but they do not offer complete cure. The answer," she continued, "is in the healing techniques of Jesus. That moral aberrations, which are called sin, and physical ailments, or psychosomatic ills, stem from the same psychological source, is disclosed by the following verses of Matthew chapter 9, 3 to 8. "And behold, they brought to him a man sick of the palsy, lying on a bed. And Jesus, seeing their faith, said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, be of good cheer. Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. And behold, certain of the scribes said within themselves, This man blasphemeth. And Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, Wherefore think ye evil in your hearts? For whether is easier to say, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Arise and walk? But that ye may know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins. Then saith he to the sick of the palsy, Arise, take up the bed, and go into thine house. And he arose and departed to his house. But when the multitudes saw it, they marveled and glorified God, which had given such power unto man. Norman Vincent Peale, in his The Power of Positive Thinking, tells us of investigations he has made into successful cases of spiritual therapy. He said he found 5 factors present in all such cases. First, a complete willingness for surrender oneself into the hands of God. Second, a complete letting go of all error, such as sin in any form, and a desire to be cleansed in the soul. Third, belief and faith in the combined therapy or medical science in harmony with the healing power of God. Fourth, a sincere willingness to accept God's answer, whatever it may be, and no frustration or bitterness against His will. Fifth, a substantial, unquestioning faith that God can heal, so that you may prevent dis-ease, so that you may help to heal mind and body. You must draw upon one of the greatest resources available to men, the faith that heals, the ability to heal through spiritual therapy. There are certain rules that are discovered and are easy to follow in the battle for ease and against dis-ease. 1. Have positive, affirmative faith so that you may release the deep spiritual power of God's loving care. 2. Remember that spiritual forces as well as the scientific techniques of medicine are important in healing. 3. Avoid disharmony in your family, in your work, in your relationships with all people. Disharmony, dis-ease, and dis-ease are very similar to each other. 4. Visualize a picture of perfect health, happiness, and vitality. Let this picture sink into the superconscious so that the superconscious level of the mind can control a positive thought pattern of healing. 5. Never become upset, worried, or panicky in illness. This will only set up a pattern of negative thoughts, which will be destructive and only create greater dis-ease. There are 5 simple rules. They are easy to learn and easy to remember. They are simple, but between merely understanding them and following them, there is a difference, as there is between black and white, says Dr. M. Germain. Spiritual therapy can bring you new freedom from dis-ease. It can show you for the first time what true ease means. Not ease in the sense of leisure, but ease in the sense of love, the goodness of God, the happiness and wholesomeness of life and living. This is the power of the superconscious. This is the wisdom of the superconscious. This is the power you have. This is the wisdom you possess. It is yours to develop. It is already within you. It needs only to be discovered and encouraged. Fighting the bogeyman of the seas. Another title Dr. Germain has mentioned. Disease is often the result of dis-ease. Emotion results in chemical and physical changes in the body. These changes are the feeling of everything you think. Pleasant emotions produce changes that make you feel good. Unpleasant emotions produce symptoms of illness. To battle on the side of ease against the warning emotion of dis-ease. Remember these 5 rules? 1. Have a positive, affirmative faith so that you may release the deep spiritual power of God's loving care. 2. Remember that spiritual forces as well as the scientific techniques of medicine are important in healing. 3. Avoid disharmony in your family, your work, your relationships with all people. Disharmony, disease, and dis-ease are all related. 4. Visualize a picture of perfect health, happiness, and vitality for yourself. Let this picture sink into the superconscious so that this wonder worker of your mind can control a positive thought pattern of healing. 5. Never become upset, worried, or panicky in illness. This will only set up a pattern of negative thoughts, which will be destructive and only create greater dis-ease. And so we come to the end of this episode. Thank you for watching. We shall certainly meet here again by the next one. And until then, keep smiling and be happy. As I always say, be happy.